My name's Michael Mitchell. I'm a Yamatji man from the Gascoyne, Mulgana on my mother's side, the Belottis, and Yamatji Nyamal from the Pilbara, Mitchell from up in Nyamal country there in Port Hedland.
What's your relationship with the Working Together book?
I've known about the book for a long time. I've been in mental health, Aboriginal affairs for a long time, and I've known Pat for a long time. I actually got my degree through Pat. She signed that shiny piece of paper with the red thing on it. So it's all good. But I've used the book and many of its chapters in my processes working in Aboriginal Community Control and then in Government Health Department, mental health. So it was invaluable, the info. Well, that was a while ago. I'm just trying to think now. So it was all primarily to do with traditional healers. And so the couple of sections in there and info about traditional healers was relevant. So we brought that into the space. We've also brought it into the space in Health Department WA, government. And it's actually was part of the process when we enabled, and I think it's about right, the timing, the Mental Health Act in WA, 2014, and yeah, there was stuff in there that's relevant. So there's traditional healers mentioned and all that in that process. So it was significant in the context of all that in Health Department WA, yeah, with the Mental Health Act.
What is your favourite thing about the book?
Look, there's so much info in there, and once you understand the principles, it's easy to follow and understand. So, you know, I push a lot of people that way, and today it's the manual of resources that I push them to, as well as the book. So, between the book and the manual of resources, there's all the information in the world you need to do. Whether you're setting up a service, treating someone, helping someone, it's all there.
What are the other kinds of topics, themes, issues that are discussed in the book that you refer to or you point people towards?
Yeah, now let me think, it was a little while ago, but I worked with the National Mental Health Service Planning Framework, and we did all the Medicare items, and there's stuff in there around interpretations for traditional healers, Aboriginal workforce, processes around all that. That's now been formalised, but that info came from that. But then it was the sell to the committee and the University of Queensland to take it up. So the book, because the book's got credibility, it was easy to utilise, and people don't question that. Yeah, because the information's concrete.
Do you think that things have changed in the 10 years since the book was published?
Yes, however, because it's a big system, the close the gap targets haven't changed. But I think, and I'm positive, that the Aboriginal contribution to that has, and it's because of the book, that it's given them the relevance and the info to make a difference at their level. Now they can only do it locally through their services and that, and so, you know, they do it in their little small bites, but they do it well with the info in the book that validates and justifies their process and the results. So even though it hasn't overall made a difference, well, it has made a difference, but it's such a big beast that it's slowly making a difference, but we're only 3% of the population. Community control sector meets the needs of not the entire 3%, maybe 2 these days. I think they're promoting that, which is fair and reasonable, but it's a big task. But the book certainly does help and gives you the guidance, the language to be accepted, and especially when you do submissions and you're at meetings that matter. Yeah, it's about the language.
If you had to describe the book to someone who'd never heard of it, how would you describe it?
Oh, that's quite simple. I'd say, look, everything you want to know about blackfellas is in that book. Everything you want to know about helping blackfellas is in that book. And so that's all you need, but you need to make sense of who your target is with either your submission or your service provision. And that way you get better at it. So there's guides at the client level, but there's also guidance in there for a service provider level. So, and like for instance, in developing workforce, there's significant info that'll help you develop your workforce to national mental health standards and that. And those standards you can quote, even though they're not standards yet, but that's the next iteration.
What do you think the impact of the book has been?
Without the book, we'd be way further down the track. So the significance of the book is that, you know, we're relevant, and it's relevant in comparison to mainstream as well. So in that instance, it's actually ahead of mainstream because it's so relevant to the Aboriginal community and population and service providers that mainstream is mainstream, and whether they buy into that process or not, we can't control that. But in my instance, we did. When we did our small bit of work with the Specialist Aboriginal Mental Health Service. Now here's a good kicker and a guideline for you. So when I was the program the service manager, the Specialist Aboriginal Mental Health Service, we never had a suicide of an active client in our 12 years that I was there. When I left and there was non-Aboriginal management, they had several suicides straight away. So yeah, and to not have a suicide in 12 years, well, that's unheard of. That's off the scale. But, you know, it was that and our fundamentally different approach where we treated the person and not the illness, but that comes from the book when you read it and understand it. So when you're treating a person, you're not that person that goes to a Govey meeting with all the stakeholders around the room. So you treat the person, focus on the person, and you use language, non-verbal and verbal, that's relevant to who they are, their gender, and where they're from. So, but that's standard thing. So it's kind of what we call code switching, but you do that automatically without knowing. And you got to do it appropriately. So the book helps with a lot of that as well. So, you know, and a countryman from inland is different to a countryman from suburban Perth. Language is similar but different. Yeah, there's a different approach.
Is there anything from the book that you just want to talk about more?
I think it was the start of the process of validating traditional healers. And so that's come a long way now. And it's because of the book starting that and giving it the kickstart and the credibility that it's now in the Mental Health Act here in WA. So that's where the book has relevance, and it's got relevance around workforce too. So, like I just was involved with the National Mental Health Service Planning Framework, and we did all the workforce and items for Medicare. Aboriginal workforce is mentioned in every category apart from doctors now. But historically it was doctors that was only mentioned in. So because there's so many doctors now, it's not mentioned, but every other one is included, and supposedly in that planning framework, Aboriginal workforce is a required entity if there's users utilising whether it's beds or services. So on occasions of service, based on that, there's a formula, and Aboriginal workforce is in there. And part of the driver for all that was the book and champions like all the people that have got chapters in there, and Helen and Patton and others.
What does the Working Together book mean to you now?
Means a lot. I suggest it to people. I also suggest the manual of resources and a couple other sites that are good, but it's always been the book. And the book's actually a pretty good gift to give to someone in the health profession or families in there. So there's also that consideration. Because everything's a battle. Aboriginal health. Everything's a battle. Major battle to get anything. So the book gave credibility to those conversations and information and gave it all relevance, and more than relevance, it was kind of, I don't know what the word is, it's kind of compulsory information in there that validated the decisions in the workforce and the service provision modelling and all that. But it was the book that was the reference point or the starting point for those conversations. Yeah, something along those lines.